Representatives Phil Plummer and Mark Johnson, welcome to Message from the House.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
We're here.
Forward to this.
We are here. We got a sunny day finally.
Beautiful day outside.
In Columbus. I don't know if you guys saw the weather yesterday in our lovely state, but rained pretty much the entire day.
Things are good.
But my hostas needed it, so I guess it's a double-edged sword, right?
That's right.
Lawn's green.
There you go, lawn screen. Well, we are here to talk about the recently introduced Andy's Law, which is a very important bill, I know, to both of you. And I want to start with Rep. Johnson just asking the backstory. I know this is a very tragic incident that occurred in one of Ohio's prisons. So talk me through how this fatality shaped this legislation.
Okay, so I live just outside of Chillicothe, and Chillicothe's a town of 25,000 very good people. I mean, very good people. And I was notified Christmas morning, I was down at my mother-in-law's house, that we had had a fatality. And that concerns me very much because I look at these people as our employees. The state of Ohio, we are the face of the state of Ohio. So the next morning I was in this prison, I wanted to see the where and the hows of he was brutally murdered, and the graphics of it is ugly, very ugly. And regardless of what you see or read in the newspapers, Andy had passed away before he left that facility. And all deaths at this facility, none of them ever happened at the prison grounds. What we do, we put a Lucas device on their chest and get a pulse and then ship them out of there. You know, the nurse on site, when I talked to her personally the next day, and they were heroes. There was not, Andy's blood completely covered her uniform, and it was graphic. And his wife couldn't recognize him. His face was beat in so bad. I blame a lot of this on drug addiction. You know, just last year, in the last 12 months, there's 1,800 overdoses in this facility. 1,800. You know, we have a drug epidemic. You just don't have to go very far to read about it. Look what happened at Mansfield. We had massive overdoses at Mansfield. Mansfield's a level 3 prison, just like Chillicothe RCI is. I talked to the guy that's in charge of screening for drugs, and he told me, Mark, it's unbelievable how bad this facility is. I got 4 black eyes in 8 weeks here, the last 8 weeks. And there's little wonder why we have vacancies. When we allow all this to happen, the guy that killed Andy Lansing had 11 tickets in the 12 months prior to him killing Andy. Andy wrote, I believe, 4 of those tickets. Andy was a standout guy, and there's a lot of problems within the morale of the facility. Andy had worked there mostly his entire life. His entire life was revolved around the military and corrections. He even took a leave at one point and went to Afghanistan, or not Afghanistan, but to Iraq to oversee the military prisoners of war and help establish that. So that's what kind of guy he was. There's not one person in the town of Chillicothe that will say anything other than this guy was a man of honor and deserving of much better. They called him Dad out there. He was a correction officer's correction officer, and he did a lot of the training of the new hires. And with that, our whole town mourned. There was not one American flag in that entire town that was not half-staffed. Not one. I drove around the town. So I did a town hall the following Saturday after Andy was buried, and there was at least 125 officers, and it's just not just correction officers, it's management staff. I mean, this grows very deep. It goes from sergeant, lieutenant, major, deputy wardens. They all say we've got big-time problems, and it needs to be reeled in.
I've been to Chillicothe plenty of times for the VA and Tecumseh, and
Yep.
it's a great town. And obviously, this was something that really rocked that area, has rocked the entire state of Ohio. And it's great to hear that you are working on legislation to try to address the issues that we all are seeing. And Representative Plummer, I want to ask you, when did you first hear about this incident and why did you decide to hop on this legislation with Rep. Johnson?
Watching the media, I learned about this particular incident, and it's an honor for Representative Johnson to ask me to help him with this piece of legislation because of my background as a sheriff, and I ran a very large county jail. So,
Okay.
it's not a prison per se, but it's same customers, right? They end up from our county jail to a prison, and it's a very difficult, tough job. But Representative Johnson's talked to the line level employees. If you want to know how to do something right, ask the employees who do it every day. He's done a great job. He's done his due diligence interviewing people. So we found gaps there that need to be closed. We need processes. We need training. We need equipment for these people. These, like Representative Johnson said, these are citizens in his hometown who we need to take care of, right? And if there's problems in there, let's be grown-ups and address them, right? Nobody has all the solutions, but collectively we can figure this out.
And I want to ask, either of you, there's a long list of different provisions from an outsider who really doesn't understand or know a lot about Ohio's correctional institutions. Some of them seemed a little, like no-brainers of having the drug dogs and, having more of the security checks for drugs coming into prisons or people, but really talk me through why these aren't as common sense things as people would think and why it's so important to put these statutes in place.
Well, my perspective and my humble opinion is we just got to get back to punishing people, and they're there to be punished. They're there to be held accountable. Simply writing a ticket and putting you back in your jail cell after you've overdosed is not getting it. And we got to be mindful of we're dealing with hardened criminals, felony drug dealers that have been busted for selling large amounts of drugs. When we hand them an Apple tablet and they can communicate amongst each other and call somebody on the outside of the wall and have deliveries made, we are enabling a lot of this. We are enabling them to have conference calls amongst themselves. We are enabling them to have their friends and their runners apply for work. And we have a prosecution problem that we are not prosecuting and holding people accountable for their felony crimes. It's a felony now to convey drugs within a prison. But we have an overload on a county that has 2 common pleas judges and 1 prosecutor and 2 prisons, and that's a problem in itself.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a great way of putting it into perspective. And we're seeing the rate of violence increase in our prison system in Ohio. Why do either of you think that is? Have you been able to, pinpoint a root cause and talking with folks for this legislation?
Well, the rate of violence goes back to holding people accountable.
Yeah.
When you get by with punching and slugging somebody in the nostrils and nothing happens and you don't get time added to your sentence, then what's the incentive for good behavior? And so when you do not impose additional stipulations on people and hold them accountable, that just breeds more bad behavior. And trust me, there's people inside the walls of our prisons that all they want to do is come in and do their time, get good behavior. If you have good behavior, you get dropped down a level in prisons. I mean, you have good behavior. If you're in a maximum security prison with no write-ups, you get dropped down to a level 3. And several months later, I think it's 18 months, you drop from a level 3 to a level 1 or 2. And you reward good behavior. But we've got so much out of hand violence that it's taken a toll on the staff, and there's little wonder why we have such vacancies within our staff. We simply don't have so much of a hiring problem. What we have is a retention problem. I hear from people all the time, as soon as I qualify for my pension, I'm out of here. and they take early retirement and go find something else and draw their pension as a supplement for maybe a lower wage job. You know, I can't tell you how many's retired at RCI since Andy Lansing was killed.
Rep Plummer, did you, as a sheriff with your county jail, were you seeing it difficult to keep talent or retain employees and things like that?
Yeah, the corrections job's usually a stepping stone for to become a law enforcement officer. So our turnover rate was incredible as well. So like Representative Johnson said, we need to pay these people properly, give them good benefits, and give them a good retirement so they have something to strive for. Our prisons are difficult. There's 45,000 plus inmates in our prison. Some of the worst people in society are in the prisons. We have 100 people on death row, right? Like Representative Johnson said, there has to be a consequence for your behavior. You're in there for a bad deed, right? Now, you can't get in there and even have worse deeds and not be held accountable, right? We have death row for a reason. It's time we start utilizing it and, raising the stakes here so people will start treating our guards like human beings. I think we have a great bill here that'll plug some of these gaps. We tried to get some of these in the budget. Unfortunately, they were taken out. We're still at the table with that, but things have to change soon because, the prisons, they're a necessary evil, and you need employees to run the prisons. The inmates can't run the asylum, and they will if you let them. You got to be firm, and you got to take care of business in those prisons.
Yes, and kind of piggybacking off of retention and talent, a piece of this bill would have DRC hiring a consultant to address the staffing shortage. Why was that important for you to add in? Have the prisons been receptive to this part of the legislation?
Uh, just simply hiring people with arms and legs off of the street is probably not the best recipe to get a good correction officer. And that's what we have gotten down to today. I'm saying the reason we want some type of recruitment agency, well, let's go to military bases. Let's look for former military police. Let's look for former correction staff that was within the military. And those who, like Andy Lansing, those make your rock star correction officers. Now, not every correction officer is going to have that kind of background, but at least if you have several to mix in and help train others that does not have that background, I think that is a key to having a good correction staff and hiring top quality people, no different than a highway patrol screens their candidates coming into the academy. And yeah, we used to have a much tougher system through civil service exams and so forth. But when you have a booming economy, which we are very proud of, you have to go to other measures to find good recruits.
Absolutely. And I want to hone in on Andy's story for those who might not be familiar with it. I know we touched on it at the beginning of the episode. Would you mind talking me through how old Andy Lansing was, the family that he leaves behind, just to put into perspective for folks how important this
Sure.
legislation is?
Andy Lansing was 62 years old, and just picture yourself, he was by himself out in the middle of the yard, no escorts for moving our prison from our inmates from one building to the next. Uh, that in itself is a problem. They need to re-implement controlled movement at this facility. When I say controlled movement, that puts an officer in the front, an officer in the rear when you are moving staff around. And that has been long since forgotten. And Andy was by himself. He was a sitting duck. It was 7 a.m. on Christmas morning, which it was still dusk. It was dark. This is not the best lighted facility. The facility across the streets had a lighting upgrade. It stands out for miles away. This facility at RCI has lighting that was based around 1986 when it was built. So there's a lot of issues there, so I hope that helps you understand. But Andy's family has gone through a lot. His own nephew watched him be put on a gurney and hauled out of there. and he works there. He has family members employed here. His family are very honorable people. His wife got a letter about 3 or 4 days after Andy was buried that her health care was cut off. And this went on for not weeks, but months, trying to restore health care to her. If we can't provide health care for those who die on service in a line of duty, then what kind of human beings are we as legislators? And what are we thinking here?
Yeah. Representative Plummer, have you had the chance to talk with the family or go to any of the, prisons that you guys are working to reform yet? Or I know these are early days. Obviously, it's just officially been introduced.
Yeah, no, I get a lot of my intelligence from the media and Representative Johnson, but this bill, some key components of this bill we need to discuss. One is accountability. These corrections officers, they're not punching bags. They get urine thrown on them, feces thrown on them, spit on, and prosecutors say that's part of doing your job. No, it's not. No, it's not. These inmates need to be held accountable for that behavior. We're not sending these hardworking Americans in these prison cells to get beat. This is ridiculous. So the consequence piece there is very important to us. I think that's a very good part of the bill. And we just need to let these employees know we have your back, right? We're not going to throw you into the dungeon and let these inmates do what they want to you. There's going to be accountability going forward.
Yeah, thank you for that. And one of the last couple questions that I want to ask, what message do you think this piece of legislation sends to, the families of correctional officers, the people of Ohio, the inmates in Ohio? What do you think this message is?
Phil nor I or anybody in this building wants our inmates to be roughed up, mistreated in any way. We want them to have respect also. But we have to have law and order even behind the walls of our prisons. We have to have common sense. It's not rocket science. We got to give the tools to our correction officers to get law and order. We have to get the drugs out. Until you can get a handle on all the unlawfulness of the drug epidemic, we've got major issues. We got dealers in here operating drug rings from behind the walls of the prison that have their runners, and they have their runners apply for work, and for as little as $1,500, they'll make a drop. Wow. And I've got that as evidence and testimony from a guy that was just recently charged at Lucasville. The Scioto County prosecutor is prosecuting him, and we've got the affidavits and the statements from the person that was arrested.
Yeah, I had no idea. Thank you for breaking that down. I'm sure listeners will be surprised, too, to hear that the people that we even think we're employing in these prisons aren't always straight and narrow and doing their jobs. Representative Plummer, is there anything else that you want to add in as far as a message that this bill sends?
Yeah, we want more oversight in these prisons. We want to know how many lawsuits the taxpayers are paying. We want to know how many assaults there are in these prisons. We want to know how many overdoses are in these prisons. We have an oversight committee as part of the legislative body, but I don't think they get the information they need. So we're going to demand the information we need. If they need additional finances, that's where we step in. But these prisons are part of the state of Ohio. We have a duty to oversee them as well. But we need the information from the organization so we can help do our jobs as well. So a lot of more oversight, a lot of more, compliance.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a piece of legislation that we will definitely be following. Obviously, we have about a year and a half left of this General Assembly, fortunately. That is all the time that we have. It's already been 30 minutes, which is, I could keep talking about it just because it's such a tragic and, robust issue. Quickly, you can follow us on the Ohio House GOP Caucus on Facebook, Ohio House _GOP on Instagram, and OHR GOP Caucus on Twitter. You can also subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Representative Phil Plummer and Representative Mark Johnson, thank you guys so much.
Thank you for your good work.
Yeah, thank you.